Morning, class, and happy asynchronous day. So today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the Southern Gothic, which is a subgenre of the modernist movement. So we've been reading Ernest Hemingway, a key figure in the modernist movement, but now we're going to be shifting to the Deep South, into this subgenre. But since it is a subgenre, it still shares the same type of themes that we see within Hemingway, the alienation, the angst, the enemy that these characters feel that are swirling all around them. Except its setting is in the Deep South, and so this unique setting allows the writer to explore some of these anxieties based on these shifting patterns that we see in the post-Civil War, where sort of the illusion of the grandeur of the Deep South is slowly being peeled away. That facade is being stripped down, and the reality of sort of the racial and social animus is being exposed and explored. So allow me to share a PowerPoint with you, and we'll talk about some of the characteristics of both the Gothic literature and the Southern Gothic. So I'd like you to take some notes. You'll be responsible for this information to understanding these short stories, but also for have this background information as we move through the course and we talk about some of the other works of literature that we're going to be exposed to as we're moving along here. So feel free to stop the video at any time, to jot down some notes so that you can have this information. So I'm going to share my my screen at this point, and we'll take a look at this PowerPoint. So Southern Gothic, its tradition is in the Gothic literature that came about at the end of the 18th century. So when we think about the traditional Gothic, you may want to think about Frankenstein, which is came about, that was in 1832. But even before that, we had figures such as Anne Radcliffe and Monk Lewis that were writing in this traditional Gothic in the late 18th century. Now, it was named after Gothic architecture because the common setting is buildings that were in the Gothic style. It's writing that uses dark scenery and imagery to develop this atmosphere that effectively combines elements of romance, horror, and death. It was a reaction to the Enlightenment movement and the Romantic literature that preceded it. Now, the traditional elements that we see within the traditional Gothic are those elements that are also shared by the Southern Gothic, elements of the supernatural. It often reveals the dark and irrational parts of human nature. Now, within traditional Gothic, that is different than Southern Gothic, it's traditionally set in the Middle Ages, more remote locations, as I mentioned before, sometimes abbeys and castles. But it is an understanding of the human condition that's gained through horror. Now, the Southern Gothic. Edgar Allan Poe was part of this, but as when we think about traditional Southern Gothic, we're thinking about the Deep South. And it's uniquely rooted in the South's tensions and its aberrations. It brings to light, as I was mentioning before, the illusions of this idyllic vision of the pastoral agrarian South. And it reveals the truth of the matter, the massive repressions of the region's historical realities, slavery, racism, and patriarchy. So now, the Southern Gothic is irrational, it's horrific, it explores these transgressive thoughts, desires, and impulses. We see grotesque characters, dark humor, and an overall angst-ridden sense of alienation. Now, one of the key figures in the Southern Gothic is William Faulkner, and this is the short story that we're going to be reading, A Rose for Emily. He's perhaps the largest of the Southern Gothic figures. So within William Faulkner, you have a post-Civil War and this defeat in the following social, racial, and economic ruptures in the lives of its people, the anxieties that were felt by the poor whites and the blacks in aristocratic families alike, that marks Faulkner's work as deeply Gothic. Now, his language is a challenge. His complex, modernist, labyrinthine language creates in its readers a similarly Gothic sense of uncertainty and alienation. Now, A Rose for Emily is accessible to us. We still see some of the complexities of the language, but when we get into some of the novels that Faulkner read, such as The Sound and the Fury, that's where we truly see him working with this complex language. after Faulkner, we're going to be reading a short story by Flannery O'Connor, and she was writing one of the key figures of the Southern Gothic in the generation after Faulkner. Her characters are steeped in the grotesque, which is a subgenre of the Gothic as well. And this is a scene from what we'll be reading as well, which is Good Man is Hard to Find. So this gives you a little bit of background about the Southern Gothic, and hopefully that now that you'll be understanding exactly its traits, its elements, and this helps you appreciate. So as you're reading A Rose for Emily, we want you to be focused on the setting, and how does the setting sort of play a role as a character within the short story. Also, pay close attention to the characters and what they value. As you know, one of the standards of this unit is the conflict between different values. So keep in mind what is important to these various characters and how does that create tension within the work. So I hope you enjoy the short story, and we'll be talking about this on Tuesday. All right, have a good day.